Alright, so I played a game recently called Vampire Therapist. It's a visual novel about exactly what it says on the tin, and I'm of two minds on this one. First is the objective one. As a visual novel, this game stinks. There are no branching paths, shocking twists, or choices to actually make. The ones which are present don't amount to anything. It's just a failure state until it actually works. Second opinion is the personal one. As the game tackles mental health, a topic I'm interested in, and because of how careful the approach is, I enjoyed it and believe I learned something about myself and others. This is to say that I can't really decide whenever it is a recommendation or not, so I'll avoid the usual structure. Vampire Therapist tackles the mental health of vampires, while the main character, the therapist himself, is a vampire too. He's a cowboy from centuries past, a man who did a lot of terrible things in his time but learned to accept himself and now tries to help others see the good in themselves. Among the clients are made-up characters and some actual historical figures. The cast is rather small, sadly. My personal favorite is probably the Dr. Drain. I saw my own issues in everyone here, but it felt like he is the most relatable one. I won't spoil what they are, but we'll mention what a lot of different issues here are tackled. The pressure of should statement, disqualifying the positive, taking things far too personally, and feeding the parasocial need. It makes me think just how often we all use statements which do little more than apply pressure to ourselves and others. For example, for me personally, it's the need to do things because I see my life as a waste. I can't let myself relax even if I truly don't do that much. This constant mental pressure I put on myself is what makes me tired in the first place and makes me unable to do much of anything. It's a closed loop. Still, it's a process and I'm unable to see past this step for now. Most of the gameplay is just scrolling past the dialogue, but there are also moments when the player needs to point out the cognitive distortion out of a list of 5. The list is actually bigger, but you get to pick 5 for each individual client. When you fail to pick the right one, Andy will show up and hint toward the correct choice. Fail too many times and the day resets. This particular system is nice and all early, but as the player learns more, the distortions start to blur. I've encountered many times when the statement could be considered labeling, mind-reading, and overgeneralization at the same time. Yet only one of these actually worked. Besides, another problem was the fact that there is no actual failure state. The player doesn't get to fail and see the client get worse or upset or quit therapy. Nothing. And he just irons out all the unfortunate mistakes, but that's not all. There are also meditation and biting mini-games, both of which are little more than annoying. Personally, I'd rather it didn't happen, instead there was an art of the act itself. Maybe I'd get some good art reference as well. Speaking of, the art is easy on the eyes. There is not much variety in the sprites and there are only a handful of backgrounds, but all of them look nice. Like a cleaner, darkest dungeon. Some characters also get to change their outfits at one point, which was mildly amusing. Music is forgettable. It made me think of Atom RPG. Nothing to write home about, but it wasn't bad. Voices, though, is probably where the budget really went. I doubt Matt Mercer comes cheap. Occasionally there were a few mistakes, the outtakes were kept in, and the lines were directly aligned with what was written. But, well, all the voices were enjoyable enough. The two who speak the most, Sam and Andy, were good. Considering I dislike both of their accents, so I think that's gotta count for something. And lastly, what comes to mind is the performance of the game itself. It's not great. One would expect visual novel to run on a calculator, but for whatever reason it goes over 3 GB of RAM at times, gives me FPS drops and takes a long time to load. Also, the loading doesn't seem to happen when alt-tabbed. Nothing does. Which is just another layer of frustration. This also made the biting minigame a lot more frustrating as it was very choppy and I kept missing. Still, I guess it runs well enough to actually play, so it's not too bad in that regard. And by the way, speaking of that, I actually had a game recently. I think Merchant's Guide to the Kingdom is the name. That game just eats 100% of my RAM immediately and doesn't load anything. So if you're curious what game has low system requirements but yet for some reason runs worse than anything else in the world, yeah, there's one. So, as far as Vampire Therapist goes, this is all what came to mind. I think I was taught something new, unlike vast majority of games I play, or games in general. And that is definitely a boon. So, have fun, mate.